do this thing. Podcast time again. Episode 3?
3, yeah.
Episode 3. And then we're finally going to do the origin stories for episode 3. Actually, why is my mic so far away? I think this will be better now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Ola, we decided, we're going to talk a little bit about how we got here so that people who are listening in understand where we're coming from with some of these perspectives or ideas or opinions or whatever it may be. So we figured this is a good time for us to dive into a little bit about our background.
Yeah, it's always nice to do some character development, origin stories,
And that's the point of this episode. So we're gonna talk about our career so far, and how we got here, and what we're up to, I guess, nowadays, so people can have a understanding of who you are.
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Okay, I can go first. I work as an ABM manager at a SaaS company, and I didn't get there through like a traditional path. Actually, I had to take a few lefts, take a few rights in order to get there. It's been a windy road so far, but yeah, I guess I'll tell you the story of that. When I originally got to Canada, I was studying mechanical engineering, and I graduated with that degree. But before that, just before graduation, like maybe a semester before, I started getting really interested in entrepreneurship. And that's actually what put me down this road. So I took an elective with one of the professors at the university that I went to, and it honestly changed the trajectory of like my career. I thought I was going to finish up and probably end up in the oil sands or something like that. All of the work terms that I'd done so far have been in the oil sands and or something to do with the oil and gas business. You know how big it is in Newfoundland.
Yeah.
Oil and gas was the main thing. And I remember actually even before I left and got to Newfoundland, everybody at home was so excited. He's like, oh, he's going to go be a petroleum engineer.
That's where the money is, all the money.
Yeah, so and as you know, coming from back home, that's where it's like, that's the dream. It's basically you get over here, you study, you become a petroleum engineer, you start raking it in, and your life is pretty much guaranteed. But funny enough, my last work term, I was working at this company, I won't name it, but I was working at the company, like one of the companies in the oil sands, and I had a meeting with one of the VPs. So this is a pretty big deal. Like maybe not so much in like a tech company where it's smaller. Mm-hmm. You could probably meet the VP like just walking down the hall or whatever. But at oil and gas, there's like true hierarchy in that like you never see any of these. The most you might interact with is maybe a director level person, but like the VP, C-suite, you never see them. They're like traveling by helicopter or whatever. So I somehow got a meeting booked like through my manager with them, and the VP was starting to tell me about like all of the benefits of working for this company long term, like what that would look like. And one of the things that they were saying is that, when we hire somebody new, we want to invest in them really long term. Like we expecting them to have like a 30-year career here. We set them up really nicely. Like all of you new grads are like $1 million investment on our part. So like we expect that, that return from that investment. And they did have like a lot of perks. I remember that being like something that was really attractive. They're like, yeah, we'll get you a house in Fort McMurray. Like it would be completely, like the down payment and all of that would be paid for. You would just be responsible for the mortgage. And then after, you had like a clause for like 5 years where if you left within 5 years, you just have to pay back the down payment and all of this kind of stuff. So like they had all these incentives to try and get you to stay. But that I was stuck, like everything else she was saying was basically just in the background after she said 30-year career. This is going to be your life.
Wow.
And looking down the road and seeing like my whole life laid out, it was just not me, man. It actually scared me quite a bit. Whereas for, the more security-oriented people, they probably prefer something like that, where, I've got my security, I can just like live out this career. It's already been planned. It's been done by people. But for me, I found that was really restrictive, and having only done engineering for a few work terms and like all of the academic terms, I wasn't sure I was ready to commit to something like that. So so I tell you that story to say like why I was in the mindset of like going into an elective for entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. I wanted to change it up and to learn something new before I was out of university. So it was one of the first times that was offered, actually. at the university, which was really interesting. It was like an experiment almost. It was the time where there was not much innovation on the rock. That's what they call Newfoundland. But for those of you who don't know, there wasn't a whole lot of innovation. Everything was oil and gas, like we mentioned before. So they had this idea that maybe if they started teaching entrepreneurship classes, they could bring kind of like like a mini Silicon Valley over there as well, just by fostering an environment for that kind of
I
thing.
got a funny story for that.
Yeah? Oh man, tell it.
That entrepreneurship stuff.
Yeah.
I was part of the founding group.
You're involved in that initiative? Yeah. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
They were like,
Like,
we need to.
It was like an Avengers kind of thing. Like
Yeah.
literally, I'll tell you when I get to my part.
Gotcha. All right. So these stories are gonna overlap, and you'll notice that. So anyway, so I'm in the mindset I need to, get into entrepreneurship. I took this course. Then I started learning all these things about like what it's like to create a business plan, what it's like to get investors to be interested in the business, what it's like to get those first sales so you can prove the concept, understand if your business has like legs by doing things like total addressable market analysis, things like that. So very practical. And towards the end of it, they wanted us to pitch an idea at the end of the term. So I'd learned all these skills. We had done it in a bunch of smaller projects, and now it's like time for a big project. And I was partnered with a couple of my classmates, other people who were doing mechanical engineering as well, and we had come up with this idea to develop a synthetic skin to essentially help doctors or like medical students to practice suturing skills on it. So we made it out of silicone, different densities of silicone were all put together on top of each other to mimic the different areas or different thickness areas. What am I even saying? The layers. That's the word I was missing. The layers of the skin. So we created that, and people loved it. Like we took it to MunMed, and we started to like just show different students it, and they were like, this is great. Like, yeah, I would be interested in using something like this rather than like the banana or like an orange peel, which is what they typically would use. So we had a product, and it was kind of interesting, and people were interested in it. So we were like, okay, let's build our project around this. So we did, and then around the same time, Mel Woodward decided to sponsor this initiative that was going on with all of the entrepreneurship that was happening at MUN, and they created something called the Mel Woodward Cup. And Mel Woodward's like was a big business person based in Newfoundland and Labrador, and his family is balling because of it. Like they own a bunch of businesses. Like they have a helicopter business, I'm pretty sure. But anyways, they're rolling in it is what you need to know. And they decided they were going to sponsor this because they wanted to see innovation happen at the
It used
Rock.
to be called the Pitches and Pitchers event.
Exactly. It's that exact same thing. So I think it followed even the exact same format, likely.
Yeah, they just became a sponsor.
So they sponsored it and became the Mel Woodward Cup.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So I'm learning history myself here. And so when they sponsored it, there was prize money to be won. And that's when like a switch happened in my head where I was like, wow, your ideas can be worth something. So we entered the pitch competition with our idea, and a couple of other classmates, they did a couple projects actually. One, funny enough, we were the first group to go with the Mel Woodward Cup when it was called in. Okay. One of the other competitors was Collab. So which is really interesting, and that's like classmates of mine. And so they were in the entrepreneurship group as well. It was myself and like my team, and then like another team as well that won. Can't remember who the third group was, but anyhow.
Is it Peachy? Chrissy.
It was Peachy. Yeah. It was Chrissy. It was Peachy. So she pitched that as well, and we won. We won the competition, which was again reaffirmation that entrepreneurship is a real thing. People will pay you for your ideas. People want to invest in you, and you can go down this road. So that took me down a road of trying to build a business. So I started to try and work on this company for a little while with my team. After a while, we realized that we couldn't actually turn it into a business for a bunch of reasons that would warrant an episode in themselves if you want to break them all down. But essentially, after 6 months of trying and like using some of that money to get some traction, we realized like it wasn't really a sustainable thing. But the whole time I was doing that for the 6 months, I'm working at the coffee shop on the side, working on this for 6 months. I'm learning all these marketing skills. It's like I elected to do the marketing side, like be in charge of revenue essentially. and that forced me to learn, advertising online, digital advertising basics, so things like SEM advertising, like on Google and whatever. So I'm learning this, and my prof is acting like a mentor at the time, and then he actually joins a startup in St. John's. I won't mention that one as well, just for, I don't know, anonymity, I guess.
Yeah.
So I joined that startup as well because like he was saying, you're learning all these skills. You're saying you're gonna fold on the business, but like those skills are still valuable. Like come work at this other startup.
Oh, cool.
And I was employee number 20 at that point, so like true startup vibes still, which was really great for me because it acted as a bit of like an incubator. I could grow with the company as it was growing. Everybody was learning, everybody was new to it, so it didn't feel out of place to not know what you're doing and be like learning as you're going, driving the car as you're like putting the tires on, essentially, that kind of thing. So dove right into the world of marketing, learned digital.
The startup term is staring into the abyss while chewing on glass.
That's what we were doing, man. We're doing a bunch of chewing.
Or jumping off the plane while building the parachute.
Exactly. That's actually what it felt like a lot of the time, especially because I felt like I abandoned a pretty solid path.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm just going to hop into the abyss. Actually, there's a story. Man, I'll tell this story another time when we talk about travel.
Yeah.
But I remember a specific moment where like it felt like I was looking out into the abyss, and it was, remind me to talk about this when we talk about travel. Right. But anyways, so I dove head first, and it started to work out. I learned that one channel, Google AdWords first. Then I started learning all these other channels that supported, because AdWords is good for capturing intent, but then you start to learn about how do you create that intent, and then how do you create that intent for less money. So all of these are just introduce you to new channels. So like creating intent was maybe some Facebook advertising. How you create intent for less money would maybe be an SEO play, and then that brings you into the world of content and things like that. So very slowly I just like built my skill set on different channels, and I just grew within the company. Then like maybe 2 years later, I left. I decided I was gonna move out west, actually. And it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, but just before the pandemic. So work from home wasn't a real thing. And I wanted to be able to move out here and work from home. Yeah. But they were like, how can we have one person be out there? There's 60 people who still work at the company, like in the office, you felt like you'd be disconnected. Yeah. And then, so I had said, okay, you know what, like I'm set on this plan, I'm moving out west. So I guess this means my resignation. And they're like, all right, I guess you're resigning. So I gave them tons of notice. And then, funny enough, everybody started working from home like the month after. Oh my God. And everybody was forced to actually just learn how to do that. Yeah. And productivity didn't even fall. In some cases, it was even better because people weren't commuting from, outside the city and stuff like that. But by then it was kind of too late, and I think there was a bit of friction there as well because I had decided to move and all this kind of stuff. So anyways, it meant the end of my relationship with that first job, but it also opened another door because when I moved out here, they still hadn't replaced my role. Yeah. And that's when I started consulting. Okay. So I started a side gig, started consulting, and I was consulting for them. Yeah. And as I was moving across, driving across, I actually stopped in Halifax for a few days just because I know a few people in the East Coast and some of them are in Halifax. And one of them was an old coworker of mine from that original startup. Okay. He was working on a new startup. It's like, oh, like you don't have work right now? Like, come talk to my CEO. And this company is very small at this point. It's like 9 people, I think, at the time. Yeah. So when I talked to the CEO, he was happy with what he heard. And he's like, yeah, come on in. It's like, we'd be happy to have you. So I interviewed and basically got the job as I was coming across. So I had something that set me up while I was here. Fast forward a little bit, worked with them, learned the business-to-business side of marketing. At first, it was a consumer business. Yeah. So now I had to learn like how to actually market to businesses and understand all the decision makers, crafting a message for all of the various people, longer sales cycles, all of these challenges essentially. So I learned that there. Then I decided, I'm really focused on the growth aspect of the demand generation. Some people actually think like demand generation first and then growth marketing is a subset.
For people that don't know what demand generation is, what is demand generation?
Oh yeah, that should probably, I'm doing that marketing thing where everybody knows everything. Demand generation is essentially any and all activities that create demand for your product. So for for some businesses that might be Facebook advertising, you know. For other businesses, it might be an SEO play, or it could be like a content-specific play by providing value to them first. There's lots of different tactics depending on the business. But yeah, so demand generation can be considered a subsect of growth, depending on how you think about growth. But growth can also be considered a subsect of demand generation.
Okay.
Just so I can clear up what I was trying to say earlier. But I realized that the growth part was what I was really interested in, is like experimenting, trying new channels, figuring things out. You know, you have all the puzzle pieces on the floor. How do they all connect for it to become a new channel for you? So because I realized that's what I wanted to spend my time doing, and less of the managerial kind of like day-to-day things of like marketing, it was time for me to move on from that second startup as well. So then I joined this third one, where I joined as a growth manager, but through some changes that happened, throughout the time that I've been there, I ended up getting promoted into ABM manager role. So now I'm looking after this channel. It's a brand new experiment for me. I'm still learning. It's the same situation as it was like 5 years ago when I got started on this journey. But yeah, trying to figure this out step by step. But yeah, that's how I landed at ABM.
That's such a cool story, though.
It's a windy road, but we
from engineering to ABM marketing. That's crazy.
Yeah, I would have never guessed this is where it would end up.
I guess, what do you think helped you though to like, you know, make that transition? Would you say desire, flexibility? What would it be?
That first one was definitely flexibility. So I did a bunch of work terms as an engineer, and I saw like various managers of my managers. I saw their lives, and I realized I wasn't, you know, jealous of that. I didn't want that life, and so I just realized they weren't living that flexible a life, especially when I was in the oil sands. It's like 12-hour days. You're doing the same thing pretty much all day, every day. It just didn't sit right with me. I just couldn't envision myself spending 30 years doing that, chasing promotions to just become somebody that you don't really want to be. So yeah, that actually helped me make that leap a little bit, is knowing that I didn't want this path. Let me try something brand new.
Okay.
I was happy to roll the dice a little bit.
Interesting. Okay. For me, my career has been very careers. I've had multiple careers at this point.
Yep.
It initially, what I'm doing right now, funny enough, is what I started my career with, but I didn't know it at the time.
Okay, that's interesting. How are you gonna tie this
what a
up?
way to start. Sorry. By the way, this is Ola, and that was Mac. For people that don't know our voices yet.
Yeah, should have maybe introduced myself before I went into the story.
Yeah, no worries. You know, we're figuring this out. We are jumping out of a plane while building a parachute.
We're doing the same thing again.
That's what we're doing.
Again, man.
You know, we'll figure it out. You grow with us as you're listening to this. You know, you can give us your feedback. You know, tell us what we're messing up, what we can do better.
Yeah, what makes this an easier listening experience? You know.
Exactly. We want this to be a growth journey. As much as we're sharing what we've done to get to this point, we're also trying to grow to the place that we're getting into the future.
This still feels like the foundation. We're still at the beginning. Man.
Exactly. Day one. So for my story, when I finished high school, at 17, and at that time I was in Nigeria, and all of my options were to school in universities in Nigeria. I used to spend my summers in the UK, but I didn't want to go to university there. At the time, I found my family in the UK a bit controlling. Someday, if you're listening to this, we're cool now. Well, at the time, I found it controlling, and I didn't like that. So I stayed in Nigeria. But I didn't like any of the universities. I did entrance examinations. I pretty much didn't even study for any of them. I didn't care about passing. Somehow I managed to still pass for a couple of them. I got an admission. I refused to go.
Wow.
I was just doing my thing. So I used to save a lot of money, and I don't know why, but for some reason, I've always been into computers, like since I was young. When I was using like VTech computers, I was always VTech. They're like toy computers.
Oh, okay.
So they look like real ones, but they're toys.
Okay.
So I used to have those. Anytime I go to like people's houses and their computers are having issues,
Yeah.
I would just go and fix it. Even
Yeah.
though before we even had computers at my house, I was just that person that
into
was
it.
always like, when you find me bored, Nigeria, the power goes out a lot.
Yeah.
So the way I spent my time was I would just be in some room with some electronic,
Yeah.
just
opening
it up and
Just
fixing
see
it,
what's going on.
mixing things together. Like I'll mix a freaking fan with AC. Like I used to do crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll be the one to break it because
Yeah.
I'm doing experiments, and
Yeah.
I would also fix it.
Yeah.
So I was the Mr. Fix It guy. Bob the Builder was like my favorite cartoon because he fixes things.
You're resonating with Bob.
Yeah, so that was what I was. And then I bought a bunch of software like Photoshop, Maya, Autodesk, music softwares,
Yeah.
Goldwave,
Fruity Loops?
of course. I got a funny Fruity Loops story. We'll get into that when we do music,
Yeah.
because that was how my music journey started.
Yeah.
But Fruity Loops was a big one as well.
Yes, a big influence.
So Goldwave. So I actually, when I spent my summers in the UK, I'll use Goldwave to convert music
Yep.
and then send it to my phone. So that was how I got music on my phone then. And eventually, I just became very obsessed with softwares and playing with them. There was no goal or purpose.
Yep.
So from that, I ended up becoming good at Photoshop.
Yep.
I ended up teaching people how to use Photoshop.
Okay, yeah.
I became good at the music editing software.
Yeah.
I wasn't making music yet, but just knowing how to manipulate sounds and edit and cut and all that stuff.
Yep.
So I was good at that. And then the Fruity Loops journey started, where I will tell the story someday, the full story, but
Yeah.
pretty much I got into Fruity Loops.
Yeah.
And then I started making music.
Yeah.
And all my friends would be at my house, we'd just be playing with Fruity Loops.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was what I was doing, just making music.
So when did you get that computer that you were using for Fruity Loops?
Oh yeah, at some point my mom got a proper computer.
Yeah, it
So
was-
not VTech. No.
Yeah.
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 At some point my mom got me a proper computer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I used to just play with computers, and the reason why it's so valuable is because a lot of my job now, is design and do research on software, and I do consulting for tools and things like that. Like I'm pretty much getting to do serious version of what I was doing at 17, which is wild.
Right.
But in between that, my story of how I came to Canada is something we'll do as well.
Yep.
But I ended up going to Canada
Yep.
to study computer science, and because I was always a science student in school. In Nigeria, they divide you into business, art, or science.
Yep.
So I was always a science student. So I moved to Newfoundland, and I told people wanted to study computer science, and they were all like laughing, like, "Oh, Nigerians Africans don't do computer science. Like, what do you think you are? Blah blah blah."
Wow.
So that was
Hating
not encouraging for a 17-year-old going to 18 at the time.
Yep.
Then I was in this new world where I was free for the first time. Remember, I wasn't free in the UK, and in Nigeria, my mom was also, I was
You were at
sheltered.
home.
Yeah, so I was 17 in this new place, doing my own thing.
Yeah.
So I was doing computer science,
Yeah.
but also then I picked up DJing because I was already making music.
Yeah.
So I picked up DJing, and then I started doing that. I became known as a DJ.
Did they let you into the clubs being 17?
Wait, how many years ago now? So that was 15 years ago, so I can't get in trouble. Okay, cool. I was 17. That was how I got into the club.
Yeah.
That was my fake ID.
Yeah.
My fake ID was DJ. Yeah, that's a funny story. I was outside the club one time. I was trying to get in with a fake ID that didn't work.
Yeah.
Then I noticed that there was a DJ that walked in,
Yeah.
and he looked younger than me.
Yeah.
And I had this light bulb moment where I was like, wait,
There's
I
a
wonder
way
if
in.
anyone ever IDs a DJ.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's test it.
Yeah.
And I learned how to DJ, and I went back to the club, and they let me in.
No problems.
Yeah.
man.
So no one IDs the DJ.
There's always a way of it.
No one. But yeah, I was doing that while my school. I was more known for like a DJ. I wasn't doing as great in school
Yeah.
because I was always an A student my entire life. But for the first time, I was not doing as well in school.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know why.
Yeah.
But so my first semester was it was all right.
Yeah.
Then second semester, people had got into my head. Then the whole Nigerians don't do computer science. So I was like, okay, fine, maybe I'll switch to business.
Yeah.
I thought the reason why I wasn't doing as well was because it was too hard.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize it was my own fault.
Yeah.
So I switched to business, and then I started doing business.
Yeah.
And while I was doing business, my mom was having money issues back home.
Yeah.
So all of the funds were no longer coming in, so I had to figure out my own way.
Yeah.
So I guess that was something to fix.
Yeah.
So I was not a businessman. I was nothing. I was not entrepreneurial. Like everything I did up to that point, I gave people for free. People would offer to pay me money, and I would not, take money. I was not a business person.
Yeah.
But I had to find a way to make money. I used to sell used books in the university. I'll take, it was like an arbitrage. I didn't know the meaning at the time, but that was what I was doing. Yeah. I'll take books from this corner of the university that no one ever goes to. And I mean literally, I've been there for 2-3 hours before reading, no one came there. Yeah. And then I'll take the book and put it on the internet, on Kijiji, where everyone is looking for these books. Yeah. And then I was making easy $200 a week.
Yeah, wow.
And it was, so that was my first gig. Yeah. Then I would buy stuff on the internet, and then I will customize it a little bit, fix stuff, resell it again. Mm-hmm. So I started doing a lot of that. My business class, once again, I was still DJing at this point. Yep. So I wasn't doing that well. Yeah. However, there was this class, entrepreneurship and marketing. Those were 2 classes that I did really well with very little effort. Yeah. I was still not caring as much.
It just clicked easily.
Yeah. For especially the entrepreneurship class, I remember it was a group project. All semester, I was working with this group of students, and they decided that our idea would be, we needed to present an idea just like you did for your group project as well. Yeah. And our idea was to start a hot pots business. Yeah. Now it's everywhere, especially in Vancouver. Yeah. But this was in 2008 in Newfoundland. It was not anything. Nothing at all. So we decided to do that, and I wasn't really into that business, but I contributed. The team was very good. On presentation day, we ended up presenting this idea, and we were the last group to present, and 2 groups went before us with the exact same idea. Wow. And it was the worst thing ever. And this was, at this point, I wasn't a clear speaker. I was shy. I didn't speak. I wasn't supposed to speak for the group. I was supposed to be the guy that just stays there, nods his head, and just smile. So I ended up just being there. So we were supposed to present, and the girl that was supposed to lead, she started crying. And then I looked at the other members of the group. They all looked scared, and I don't know what happened. I've never spoke to anyone in that class except my group. Yeah. And I just went up front, and I just hey, as you can all tell, there are other groups that already presented the same idea, but here's a little twist. Then I was it's not about the idea. At this point, this is a commodity. Yeah. It's about our customer service. It's about location. It's about this. It's about that. So I didn't pitch our idea. Yeah. I just went straight to our differentiator. Yeah. I was
you already know.
I was this is how we're innovating. This is how, and everyone started clapping and stuff. Yeah. And it didn't click into my head till then. I was okay, this is interesting. And I was going into the finals because we had individual parts of that project as well. Yeah. I was going through the finals with, at most, if I'd got 100. I'd have got 70 in that course, at most. Yeah. I ended up with a 95. Wow. And then I ended up going in the summer to talk to the professor. Mm-hmm. I was why? He was he had never seen
wow.
that kind of turnaround. Yeah, because he was he knew all what we're going to present. Yeah. So he said all week he had been laughing oh, this is going to be funny.
This is going
3
to be
groups presenting the same thing. Then he was he had no idea how that got turned around. Wow. He was impressed. Yeah. So I still didn't think I would do entrepreneurship or anything. So I was, doing business. I ended up stumbling into accounting class, and I hated accounting. Mm-hmm. So once again, I switched. I was I'm just gonna go back to computer science. Yeah. This is what I want to do. Yeah. So back to computer science it was.
Okay, so you did the switch.
I was switching back and forth. I ended up just doing double major. Later on, they introduced double. Yeah. So that was good. But in between, I was applying for jobs. I did a bunch of jobs. We'll have an episode where we'll talk about all of the crazy jobs I've done. But in between, I ended working. I ended up applying for TD Bank. Yeah. So I did multiple rounds of interviews. Mm-hmm. I kept applying, and I applying for different banks. They didn't call me back. Yep. I applied for TD Bank. I did multiple interviews, and then they kept promising, or they made it sound like I was gonna get a job, and and eventually I didn't get a job, and it was very sad. I did like 6-7 rounds of interviews, and they didn't even tell me an email. They didn't even give me a notification. I had to follow up like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, oh, sorry, we went with someone else. I was so upset that day.
After 7-2 and
I was so upset that day. I was just like, this is, I just don't want to even work for anyone anymore at this point. I just want to do my own thing. So I have this friend who was like a mentor for my computer science. He was always like giving me his notes. We were always brainstorming ideas. We actually tried to start a business before. We called it like Point Up or something like that. And it didn't go anywhere. So, but we wrote down some concepts. So I ended up just going to my notes of ideas, and I was just like, oh, Point Up, this is interesting. So then I fleshed out the idea a little bit, and then I told my girlfriend at the time, I was like, hey, I'm going to work on this. Like, this is going to be my project. She's like, oh, like a business? I was like, I don't know, but I at this point, I just want to focus my energy on just doing my own thing. So that same night, I created the wireframes, wrote down all the ideas I have for it. And then I went to my friend, the one who we had already been brainstorming idea. Then I told him, he's like, wow, this is cool. Like, I want to work on this with you. So right away, he became my co-founder. We started working on that. Then he's like super smart. So he was a better coder than I ever will be. And he created like, the ideas I had pretty much, he created like a first version. It wasn't working well, but it was enough to like get me excited. I was like, wow, this is becoming a real thing. And then I took that to like one of my friends who was like very good with like branding. And then he was like, you should go pitch this to the startup community. Like this, I didn't know anything about the startup community in Newfoundland at the time. And he was like, this is a great idea, like people would like it. So I ended up going to this place called Common Ground. I applied, and
shout out Common Ground.
And luckily for me, 2 weeks from then was when they had their events for. Anyways, I can't remember the name now, so I'm not gonna talk. They had an event where you would have to pitch and you'd be part of the cohort for the summer, where they Propel, that's what it's called, Propel ICT.
Propel ICT.
So we were the first cohort, like the very first cohort of that as well.
That's interesting.
So I ended up going there. That was where my public speaking started. We were supposed to pitch our ideas, and we did the Propel meeting in the morning, where you talk to the investors and mentors, and they see if your business makes sense. The talk went well. But my business then it wasn't like great. It was very raw. But when I did a pitch later in the evening for another event, it was still the same community. I completely blanked out. I forgot what I wanted to say. It was terrible performance. But eventually when I got speaking, people asked a bunch of questions that ended up formulating my ideas. But on the fly, I was like taking the feedback and then like improving on it. So anyways, the pitch was bad. But when I went home, I was like so sad and tired. I didn't want to do this. I expected like, today was a failure. I messed up in the morning. I messed up in the evening. I'm just giving up on this. Next day, I got an email from one of the people. He was like, hey, Ola, bad performance yesterday. I'll be honest with you. Your idea also seemed like it's not quite good yet. But no worries. We like you. You seem like like a smart dude, and we feel like there's something that we can develop. And he was like, when can you meet me? And then I had a meeting. I don't want to mention his name now, but maybe we'll mention his name. I had a meeting with him, and he was just like, you're cool, like, as long as you're coachable, I'll, mentor you, blah, blah. And then that was it. And he became like my mentor for startup. And I ended up getting accepted into Propel. But later on, I found out that someone else dropped out. So I don't know if I got in because someone dropped out or actually got in. Either way,
you were in there, bro.
Knowing what I know now, I love those people now because I have no idea how I was ever, in that because we're so naive. But, I worked on the business. We were not making any money at this point, but the app was going well. We're starting to get traction. People were excited. They were downloading, they were putting their email addresses and everything. So at least we thought we had traction, it was fake traction. It wasn't fake, but it was not, now knowing what I know now, it was not real traction. I was working as an insurance agent
Yeah. Same time.
on the side on time. I was just at this party with my friend and his coworkers, and they really liked me. His bosses really liked me. They was like, "Dude, you should come work for us. You're so good with people."
Yeah.
And I ended up working insurance. The worst job of my life. I was not good at it because insurance is very scripted. You have to stay precise.
What kind of insurance?
Life insurance.
Yeah. Were you on the phones? Were you talking to people?
You talk on the phone to book the appointments,
Yep.
and then you actually go into the people's home. You travel around the province to go to people's home.
Yep.
But yeah, anyways, I ended up doing that, and I hated it. I didn't like the whole scripted thing.
Yep.
The week where I actually didn't go with the person that was training me, where I just freestyled. I was just like, I'm not doing the script. I'm just gonna do my own thing. Every appointment that I went to that week, I made sales.
Yeah.
So I was like, anyways, I just didn't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Ended up doing the business, working on it. I was working business full time. I was working insurance full time. I was working like crazy.
Well.
But yeah, it was wild times. But yeah, eventually the business just wasn't reaching where it was supposed to reach. So we had to shut it down.
Yeah.
And so after that, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I was still launching a bunch of projects on the side and driving a taxi as well.
Yeah.
While I was driving the taxi, it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Because while I was driving the taxi, I was talking to a lot of people, lawyers, doctors, engineers, trying to understand what people do, what they like about their job, what they don't like.
Yeah.
So I was learning so much about different career options. And eventually, I decided, okay, tech is the way. I have to go back into tech.
Yeah.
Even though my mentor has been telling me the entire time, and he was like, "Oh, like you're creative, like just go get another job at a tech company, or like you're entrepreneur." I wasn't really listening. I was listening, but I didn't really believe him.
Yeah.
So anyways, eventually I stopped driving the cab. I took a part-time job at a restaurant just so I can be able to, make a living at least while I figure out the next thing.
Yeah.
And then one day randomly, I just had this feeling to email someone that I knew when I was at Propel.
Yep.
So I can say Joe from Aorca. We became friends when I was in Propel. He was actually working in a similar idea to what I had.
Yeah.
And then someone told me to go talk to him.
Yeah.
That he might have some ideas to share with me.
Yeah.
So that's how we became friends. So I asked him, questions, and he became like a sort of a mentor to me as well.
Yep.
But then we'll go to events together. I'll give them rides, and so we became really good friends.
Yep.
And yeah, I just emailed Joe. I was like, "Hey, I don't know what I can do for you, but I'm able to do different roles. So whatever you need, CS, marketing, whatever, just I will fill in the blanks."
Yep.
And he was like, "Oh, we don't have any opening right now, but I'll let you know if something comes up." And yeah, so that didn't happen. I was sad. I was disappointed. And then like 2 months later, I had that feeling again. I was like, let me just message Joe and see what's up. And he was like, "Oh my God, great thing you messaged. Like we're actually looking for someone in the CS right now.
Yeah.
If you can send your resume to Jacob." And I was like, "Oh cool, let's do it."
Yeah.
So I ended up sending my resume to Jacob, and yeah, I ended up joining the company in CS.
Yeah.
Up to this point, I'd been on the product side of things because when we had my company, we didn't even talk to customers really. Like we thought we knew. Like
what to solve.
Now I know it's ego, but at the time, or ego and naivety, but at the time I didn't know. But we're just like, we don't need to do research, blah blah. But yeah, that was actually what led me to gravitate towards CS roles because I realized how bad that was.
Yeah.
So I was like, I needed to understand customers.
Yeah.
But I went to extreme. So at that time, I thought I needed to do like customer support, account management, and all those stuff.
Yep.
I didn't realize that all I needed was user research.
Yeah, and like spend time having conversations.
Yeah,
those conversations.
Once again, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So I was just there. I ended up, moving from support to account management. I grew quickly in that career. So but I already had it in my mind that I was only gonna stay in Newfoundland at that point for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
That I wanted to move to Vancouver.
Yeah.
So towards the end of the year, like November, I ended up actually getting a promotion.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation about negotiation at the time.
Yeah.
It didn't go as well.
Yeah.
And Joe mentioned, in other provinces, you probably get more because that's just how things are.
Yep.
So right away, that was like interesting.
Yep.
The gap between Newfoundland and the other provinces like Vancouver,
Yep.
the salary was a lot more
Yep.
than the difference in the cost of living. So
Yeah.
either way, I would still make more if I moved.
Yep.
So I was like, interesting. But I'd already planned to move, but I was still thinking I would stay at the company at the time.
Yeah. Yep.
But I ended up going to
that's
Nigeria.
Similar. Yeah.
I ended up going to Nigeria for the first time in 10 years at that point.
Yep.
So I was able to see like, how the economy,
years.
family, how everyone is doing.
Yep.
And yeah, that just made me awaken like a sense of purpose.
Yep.
I was like, I need to do better. I need to push myself as much as possible. I had this opportunity to make something of myself.
Yep.
So then I came back to Newfoundland and I had the conversation. I was like, hey, I'm moving to Vancouver.
Yep.
Is there anything, can I still keep working? And it was like, no, they're not remote friendly.
Yep.
They can't do that.
Yep.
So I had to quit on the spot.
Yep.
Not quit, but quit, I guess.
Yeah.
So I had to quit.
Yep.
So that sucked at the time, but I wasn't afraid for some reason.
Yeah.
So I ended up moving to Vancouver without a job, without anything. And when I got here, I had only one friend, Pablo.
Yeah.
And he was asking, so what's the plan? I was like, I only have one goal, get a job, nothing else. I'm not trying to make friends yet. I'm not trying to do anything. All I'm trying to do is just get a job. Yeah. So I was applying like crazy, like 60 jobs a day, like just, I had like
on the grind.
20 different variations of my resume. Like I tried to make it as customized as possible. I had Notion set up. I had Notion as my dream company to work for. Yep. I had Shopify, and I can't remember. Oh yeah, then one of the things I was curious about Moz, I said I wanted to work for a company that allows me to learn marketing organically. Because when I had the company, one of the reasons it failed was we just didn't have enough money to pump into it. Yeah. So I wanted to know how to do things organically. Yeah. So I ended up applying for different roles that were customer related. Yep. And the role that Moz had was actually something that I did like 10% of my job at Aorcare. Yeah. But anyways, I still applied anyways. I went to my interview. I didn't know SEO at the time. Yeah. I didn't know.
By the way, Moz is an SEO company.
Yeah, SEO software. Yeah. I didn't know anything about SEO, search engine optimization. I didn't know anything about the role. I knew it, but not, I wasn't like super experienced. But the interview went well. I ended up having multiple options for jobs. I had like 5 offers on the table. Yeah. Wow. With different I had to counter a bunch of times. Yeah. But I always had Moz at the top of my mind because it was more aligned with my goals. I wanted to. Yeah. So I ended up just I ended up picking Moz. And before I left Aorcare, I'll go back a little bit. Before I left Aorcare, when Joe and we actually had an exit interview. Yeah. And he was asking me, so I know you don't want to stay in CS forever. Like, what's the next move? I said, I don't know, but I don't know. It was like, if you could pick one thing, like, what would it be? I said, I don't know, but I'm really curious to see how user research is. Yeah. It was like, and that was the conversation. I never considered that. Yeah. Then at Moz, I ended up doing the customer thing. Then I realized that, it's not I was too empathetic for the customers for that role. Yeah. Because I'm a problem solver. Yeah. I was listening to people's complaints and issues they had with us, and I just wanted to solve it. Yeah. So I ended up just gravitating. I wanted to gravitate towards product. Yep. So I reached out to the product director at the time and asked, what if they had anything, and she said they didn't, but I should talk to someone else in UX, the UX manager. Mm-hmm. So then I reached out and she was like, oh yeah, we don't have anything right now, but we actually have this challenge. We need help with tagging our feedback and all these things. You can help us do that. Yeah. So I ended up doing so that was UX, user research. I ended up helping with the tagging half and half. Yep. And then over time I transitioned from that to fully. Yeah, then I became a user researcher, which, remember, that was what that was what I told Joe. Yeah. And I didn't even think about it until that minute. I was like, wait, this is crazy. That actually happened.
It worked out.
Yeah, and then by knowing, being in the SEO industry, being empathetic about our customers. So what happened is our customers when I did onboarding, they would ask me a question or want to do something, and I would not know the answer. Yep. So I would go and I'll spend hours after work and figure it out. So after a while, I had this repository of knowledge, and resources and everything.
Yep.
And yeah, randomly I just became like, in quotes, an SEO expert.
Yep.
And eventually, like the company Mars kind of knew that there's the whole pandemic happened, and the Clubhouse, and I was sharing my knowledge and all of that stuff, which I'm fast forwarding right now. Yeah, I ended up being known as, you know, knowledgeable with SEO.
Yeah.
So I was being asked to like host MozCon, to present our Whiteboard Fridays, to do a bunch of different things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So now getting more speaking engagements, get in front of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Building your personal brand a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I got to this point.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot of
like turning points. Which one do you think was like the most influential on? Is like the biggest switch for you, where you were on one path and I could put you on a whole other path?
The TD Bank one for sure, because when I was interviewing for that job, I had to look professional and wear suits and all that stuff. So the DJ persona was already like going away. But then when I didn't get a job and I wanted to create my own company. In order to focus on the company, I wasn't DJing anymore. I wasn't in the same scenes anymore. So my personality changed literally overnight that summer. So yeah, thanks TD.
Thanks for showing us the way, TD.
Yeah, they forced me. It was a life-changing moment. It was like a wake up. Like,
isn't it crazy in situations like that where it seems like everything is going south, but it's actually like just pushing you or putting you in that position to take the next step that you would. But at the time when you're in it, you're like, everything is falling apart.
Yeah.
But it has to all fall apart so that you can almost like build anew. But it's hard to see that when you're in the middle of it.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. I don't know how else I would have. I mean, maybe I would have figured it out eventually, because now it makes sense. And you know, I told you the whole story of, you know, I used to tinker and do all these things. Like that's like what I do at Mars right now. I'm like, you know, we have a problem, I figure things out. Like my role is user research, but I do a bunch of things that are not like even on my job description. It's to me, I feel like I'm 17 again in terms of waking up, you know, logging into the computer.
Figuring stuff out.
I just feel like I'm 17. The difference is I'm just getting paycheck where I wasn't at 17.
Man, that was a windy story, man. It's similar. It's crazy how like some of the stories had some similarities in them as well. That situation with remote, low key, was another turning point that probably worked out for the best for us, because like if we were trying to live on those early wages now, it's so difficult to get by. That wouldn't work. And they say your biggest jumps are when you move company. So like you have to move company every now and then in order to actually keep up with the cost of everything that's going up. If you stay at the same company, you're probably doing yourself a disservice over long term. I always say, like, if you're at a company, you're asking yourself whether or not you should take the next step. Like, examine the pay, if that's good or not, and examine whether or not you're learning. If you're not getting paid enough and you're not learning, it's time to go.
Those are very two good important factors, but it depends on the person, your strategy. It might not be money sometimes, it might not even be learnings, it might be connections, it might be visibility. Like this.
It's true, that's true.
There's so many, but you have to be strategic.
You consider those options, be like, I don't know. But anyways.
I didn't actually talk about the Mel Wood Cup stuff, but there was a bunch of things that happened, a lot of exciting opportunities. We'll have an episode one time when we'll talk about, you know, just being opportunistic, you know, taking advantage of opportunities that present themselves. Because I know I wouldn't be here without that mindset if I stuck to my original script. I had to switch. You did the same, you know. You had to switch.
You rewrite it, man. You see what's out there, you see what's possible, and then you rewrite it. The thing is, like, you usually get started on a path looking at somebody who's already done that path. And it may not be the right path for this time going forward. So like, you could maybe see somebody who's, you know, far into their engineering journey and all of these things, and it looks attractive. That doesn't mean it's the right thing for you to be doing at this particular time. Maybe it was right timing for that person when they were in a similar situation as you now. But things change so quickly, man, and that's part of, you learn even more of that when you get into the world of tech. Like, things are constantly moving targets.
Yeah.
So you need to just be able to be nimble, see the opportunities like you're saying, and then take them when it makes sense, and drop the distractions when they don't make sense. And you just keep going through the same decision making process. Like for me, it's almost yearly. It's like, is this still the right path? Like ask yourself, and then look around you and see if this is the environment that you should be in at the time. For those factors, some of the ones that you mentioned as well, evaluate those for yourself, whatever's important.
Yeah.
And if you're still in line with all the things that you find are important, good. Like stay, keep learning and doing whatever it is that you're doing. If you're no longer aligned with the environment that you're in, it's time to make the shift.
No, I totally agree, man. And I mentioned with the taxi job, it made me realize that not all that glitters is gold.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people that have, on paper, the best jobs, the best lives. You talk to them, and that's not the case.
They're just not happy.
Yeah. So just find what works for you, what feels right. Because me joining Aorca was a downgrade technically, because I was like CEO of my own company.
Yeah.
And then I went to like literally the bottom of the company.
Yeah.
But I didn't see it that way.
Yeah.
If you give like $20 in Nigeria, in the middle of a village in Nigeria, it would not be valued as much because you can't spend the $20.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean $20 is still not valuable.
Exactly right, man.
So for me, I wasn't valued in that environment, but that was not what I was doing it for.
Yeah.
I just needed a job for a year and a half, so I can move on, to the path I wanted to be on.
Yeah, and it worked out. I mean,
thankfully.
Yeah. So, anyways, that was the summary of our story so far. This is how we got here. The career episode. We'll talk a little bit more about like how we got to Canada. Those are some interesting stories as well. The struggle of like actually getting to the country, because that's always an interesting. And I haven't heard yours one yet. I knew a little bit about the career story, so I'm excited to talk to you about like how you actually got to Canada and all of the loopholes you had to jump through in order to make it happen. I know I had a few of my own, so I look forward to sharing that.
Yeah.
And that was our episode. We will catch you in the next one.
Yeah. All right. Peace.